Hello, everybody. Welcome to the little special edition here on Eric Jose on Making a Murderer. Today we're going to be talking with Shaun Attwood. Very exciting. I had a great talk with him, full of just a lot of info about the case and a lot of things. Great talk. But one other thing that I wanted to bring up for everybody is the fact that our good friend at the channel here, Mr. Stacy Seabrook, has uploaded one of his songs to iTunes for everybody. You can now find it on iTunes, TikTok, Manitowoc. And so let's have a listen.
TikTok, Manitowoc. Your silence breeds complacency. Tick-tock, Manitowoc. Stephen Avery, he shall walk free. Again, where to start? I don't know.
Hello, everybody. How you doing here for the Thanksgiving Day special? Really special for me. I mean, Stacy Seabrook uploading to iTunes. I'm really excited about that. Getting to talk to Shaun Attwood today. Really for the first time on my channel, getting to talk to him on my channel. Him and I have obviously talked before through Messenger and through email. But this is the first time him and I actually got to really speak at length in person, and it was really a lot of fun. So I hope everybody is going to find this to be a treat on Thanksgiving, as much as it was a treat for me to talk to him. He's a great guy. I mean, Shaun's doing a lot of good things in the world right now. He's doing he went from being, from making bad decisions and doing the wrong things, and he doesn't try to say that he wasn't. He is fully aware of what he did wrong and all that. And instead of staying stuck in that cycle, as so many can do when it comes to criminals, instead of staying in that cycle, he turned himself around and he made the conscious choice to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. And the things that he does are just, I mean, so many. We're going to be talking about him in the video, but like he gets books to students and kids in prisons and to prisoners in general, in regular prisons, adult prisons. So he does that kind of stuff. He's been on TED Talks. He's writes many books. He's got a 4-book series coming up he was telling me about with his Pablo. It's a baby Pablo Escobar, part of the Pablo Escobar series, writing about the cartel and stuff, because when he was in Arizona, and selling ecstasy is what it was, he ended up having some some dealings with the cartel, and ended up, actually there was a hit. I read that there was actually a hit put out on him by the cartel at one point and things like that. So you're going to get to hear Shaun tell you a little bit about his experience with the legal system a bit, and also what his TED Talk was about, which was named "What Looking at 200 Years Taught Me About Happiness." It's a very profound name for his TED Talk. Anyways, so we got Stacy Seabrook, we got Shaun Attwood. I hope you guys are all as excited as I am. And one other little thing, just for you guys to be a little bit extra excited about it. 1 hour after this premiere ends, with me and Shaun Attwood talking, I will be going live. Okay? So I hope everybody has something to be excited about. Wanted to wait that extra amount of time just to make sure all the Thanksgiving festivities were winding down, and so everybody could get a chance to be here. So I hope everybody's excited about today. I hope you guys are having fun. I hope you guys are enjoying your Thanksgiving. And while this is uploading and set to premiere, I will be obviously enjoying my Thanksgiving Day. And then when after an hour after the premiere, I will have done most of my Thanksgiving Day stuff. So I will be able to come here and be live with you, and my family won't hate all of you. Okay, so anyways, so that's where we're at. Hope you guys are excited. Oh, and one other thing, unfortunately, folks, you will not see the video of me while we're talking to Shaun. For some reason, my Skype didn't work right. I could not get my image to appear anywhere on the Skype. So when you see this video, you're only going to see Shaun, but you'll hear me. I'm there, and you'll hear me. So that's why you're getting to see so much of my smiling face now. Anyways, so hope you guys are all enjoying your Thanksgiving, eating lots of turkey. Have a piece of pumpkin pie for Ericoze, because I love pumpkin pie. It's good stuff. Oh, anyways, let's get to it. Hello, everybody. How you doing? We're here today on Thanksgiving. We're with a little bit of a special treat. We're getting to talk with Mr. Shaun Attwood. Many of you know who Mr. Shaun Attwood is. He's been involved with the Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey cases pretty much since MAM1 came out. He's crossed swords with Ken Kratz. He's actually even gotten a response where Ken Kratz even called him a douchebag, you know, and everything. So he's wonderful. He's great because he's actually done that crossing swords with Ken Kratz. We all know that nowadays Ken Kratz will only do soft interviews. So it's nice whenever we get to see somebody who, you know, gets in his face and challenges him on his BS. So it's a pleasure to have you here today, Shaun.
Thank you. Happy holiday over there then, I guess. It's not here in the UK, but for you guys.
Yeah, for us, it's a big day. Lots of food and festivities. So, and yeah, so for those of you who don't know Shaun, and what he's, you know, gotten up to, and stuff like that, he originally was, you know, kind of a whiz kid, wanted to get over here in America and make a lot of money in the stock market, which he did. And eventually got into doing some other things that kind of got him into some trouble, kind of with drugs and things like that. And he ended up serving time in prison in Arizona. And that experience taught him a lot. And I'm going to let him talk about it here today a little bit. But the thing that impresses me, Shaun, is the way that you went from a very negative situation and making bad choices in life to turning that around, completely flipping it around, and turning your life into a positive and doing all the good things that you do that I really admire. I really do applaud that. And so I know a lot of people on the channel probably do as well. It's impressive. I mean, you've even done a TED Talk, which I love TED Talks. They're always so informative, and those things are awesome. You know, if you want to talk a little bit about your TED Talk, I wouldn't mind.
Yeah, well, I was forced to grow up in prison. I was emotionally immature, irresponsible beforehand. Thought I was keeping the party going, importing ecstasy into Arizona. SWAT team smashed my door down, ended up in Joe Arpaio's jail, which was quite harrowing. Yeah, guards.
He's quite a character.
Wasn't my brightest idea to break the law where guards are murdering mentally ill prisoners and the neo-Nazi Aryan Brotherhood decide who lives and dies. But it taught me a lot of life lessons. I went deep inside myself, managed to read over 1,000 books in just under 6 years. I saw the harm that drugs cause people in the jail. 90% shooting up heroin, crystal meth, 2/3 hepatitis C, yellow jaundice skin, teeth rotting out. Yep. I was ashamed of putting people on that road of drug use, but I knew I couldn't change my past. So I pledged to go out and share my story in the hope young people and others wouldn't make my mistakes. Yep. And then I got contacted by a university out of Switzerland. They invited me to do a TED Talk, and that TED Talk was called What Facing 200 Years Taught Me About Happiness.
Right. That's a very profound name, too. That staring down the barrel of 200 years would be sobering, indeed, I think. Certainly.
Well, getting sentenced to 9.5 years was one of the happiest days of my life because I could see I was actually going to get out. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life in prison. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, you spoke of how you now work with youth, and I know that a big part of what you do, like for instance, like the proceeds from Unmaking a Murderer, I recall much of that went to providing like books for children and prisoners, and then a portion of it went to Stephen and Brendan, if I remember correctly. Yeah,
a portion's gone to the lawyers. The book sales flattened out, but they're picking up again now on the back of season 2. Yeah. So I'll be sending some more money off to the lawyers. And some of the money went to what a thing I've set up, whereby my public book sales and some of the money from this book, I donate books to kids in state schools and prisons. And in the last 2 to 3 years now, I've managed to donate 20,000 books to kids and prisoners. And that's
That's
because,
cool.
reading was the lifeblood of my rehabilitation. Kind people from all over the world, my blog readers, sent me books in prison, and I want to
Yeah,
give back to the community now.
that's
Yeah.
awesome. You know, that reminds me of. Have you heard of John Bunn? The
No.
he was he was recently exonerated, and the thing is, as you were just saying about reading and reading more books than you had ever read and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
The story of John Bunn impressed me, and I'll briefly tell it here real quick. He was wrongfully convicted when he was 14 years old. Didn't know how to read or write. Literally taught himself to do it. Taught himself to read or write in prison.
Yeah.
Eventually, 29 years later, he got exonerated. He was out for
Mm.
9 years before he got exonerated, but he was struggling because he was dealing with that stigma of being wrongfully convicted.
Yeah.
But when he eventually got exonerated, he, instead of being bitter and angry and mad at the world, he decided to go in the completely opposite direction. Started a nonprofit doing a very similar thing to what you're doing, where he's bringing books and putting them into kids, for kids, to kids and to prisoners, so that they have the ability to teach themselves and stuff the way he did. And I've always found that to be an admirable trait. I thought you might have heard of him, but I just say it, that impresses me. Watching people turn it around and going that extra mile to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem is very impressive. So, and I noticed that in you, and I think it's impressive.
Yeah, if you don't give back, if you're successful, you're gonna drown in your own greed.
True. Yeah, absolutely. Stay
Yeah.
humble.
Yeah.
So for those who may not know, Shaun Attwood did write a book called "Unmaking a Murderer," as he was just saying, and the book sales are picking up now with MAM2 just being released. I know a fair amount of people on my channel have been commenting, telling me that they're reading it because I've been suggesting it. I think it's a good place. What do you think? I think it's a good place for people to start if they're coming into MAM. They haven't really dug into the documents much. I think it's kind of a good place to start because you spend so much time explaining what was going on in the 85 case and really how that parallels to what was going on in 2005. So how can we really think that things change somehow between 85 and 2005 when we're seeing similar things happening over and over again?
The most shocking thing about the early case was when the staff of the prosecutor and the sheriff started to come forward and say to their superiors, "We don't think Avery did this, we think it was the Sandman." And then the prosecutor and the sheriff concocted a story. They told their own staff, who were revolting against this idea, that the Sandman had met his probation officer on the day that the lady had been attacked.
Right. And then he's in Sturgeon Bay or whatever, right?
Yeah, that just shows how corrupt. They're not interested in justice. They're interested in nailing Stephen Avery, nailing Brendan Dassey, and now they're fully committed. They can't reverse because it would bankrupt the state of Wisconsin to release them because of all the lawsuits that would come in from all the other prisoners who were processed by the same crime lab.
Yeah, absolutely. What was it? 900 of them waiting, had written the Innocence Project, Wisconsin Innocence Project, and wanted to get their evidence tested. I mean, can you imagine if just say 40 of those 900 would have been successful? The state of Wisconsin would have just been going, "We're done," because
that's why states all across America won't pay for these DNA tests, which cost a couple of $100. They won't pay for them because they're not interested in justice. They don't want these cases to unravel. Right. The compensation, the loss of face, the promises to the victims' family members, all these things unravel, and they just entrench, and that's what we're seeing with Stephen and Brendan.
Exactly. It's like in my friend Stacy Seabrook, who's been writing some songs about MAM and stuff. In his song Double Down, he talks about they're sticking to a story of which they are now bound. It's a really good lyric, but that's what they are doing. That's what they're stuck with right now. And I really think we can all see the signs of how uncomfortable they are being stuck with this now original narrative that they came up with. I think we're starting to see the signs of how uncomfortable they are with it. And I think that's actually a little bit funny.
Well, the sad thing is, we know, anyone with a halfpenny of common sense knows these guys are innocent. the prosecutors, the detectives, the state of Wisconsin, they know that they're innocent.
Right.
They all know that we know that they're innocent,
Right.
but they can't admit
Yeah.
that.
They can't.
They put forward Luke Berg, they put forward Brad Schimmel, even the governor of Wisconsin now have all become fall guys that have taken the hit for these lies.
Right. I mean, I'm hoping the appeals court is going to, when Kathleen Zellner comes in with her filing on the 20th of December, and the state responds and she replies again and whatever, as that couple of month process takes its course. I'm really hoping the appeals court's going to look at this and go, look, this making a murder thing, it's really a black eye for our state, guys. Maybe we should really, really seriously look into this and take it seriously and not just casually brush it aside. I mean, I'm hoping somebody at the appeals court starts to take that attitude, because this is a huge black eye for Wisconsin. I feel bad for the residents of Wisconsin who are going to, ultimately kind of be on the hook for all the fallout from this. That their leaders in that state have kind of, the situation that they've created. So I kind of feel bad, and I just hope the appeals court's going to go, you know what, let's finally just table this issue and get it on the table, and let's deal with it. This whole trying to act like nothing's there and trying to act like there's nothing to see here thing, it's not working. More and more of the world is paying attention, the more and more we try to act like there's nothing happening.
Yeah, I agree entirely. For judges to do that, though, to find a reason suddenly to let these guys out, it's got to be green lit from people in power. And the interesting development is we've got this new governor.
Yeah.
What's his stance, do you know? Because you're over there. I think you've been religiously posting videos and following this more closely than me.
Yeah. So Tony Evers now is the new governor. He edged it out over Walker. I think he won by, I think it's something like 2%. He won by 2% of the vote. The way Tony Evers won was he really got the population centers. He got Milwaukee. He got a couple of the really big population centers, and that was mainly what pushed him in. But Tony Evers is a Democrat. He's not uninterested in criminal justice reform. It's just that he tends to, his platform tends to lean more heavily on like education, and medical and like hospital stuff or whatever, and certain other issues like that. So he doesn't specifically mention criminal justice reform, but judging by what I can tell by him, I think he's open to it. I think criminal justice reform is something that he would be interested in. I just don't know if it's one of his like main platform topics.
Yeah, generally, because I've spoken to some of the death row guys, and they say that, when you get out a Republican, then you get out a hardcore law and order person out the way, and if someone else comes in, they usually get more play. But when these guys get elected, that's when they've got the power, and it's when they're getting closer to being re-elected that they're more amenable to public demands. Because if this guy did something for Stephen and Brendan, the accolades, the worldwide support, there's going to be an avalanche of celebration and kudos from people just all over the world. So, but right now, because he's in, he doesn't have to worry about that. But as it gets closer to the election, it might be a card he wants to play.
That was actually something I was explaining to people about Scott Walker too, because not knowing which way the election would go, I was also telling the people I saw that supported Scott Walker. There's a couple out there, sorry, but there are some out there that did support him. And so I told those people, I said, look, if you support Scott Walker, then you should be making him aware that if he wants your continued vote in the future, that he needs to take a more practical look at criminal justice moving forward. I go, you need to make him aware of that. You need to make him aware that that's an issue you care about, and that if he has enough people telling him that, he'll listen to those people more than the tough on crime people, because he's pandering to the tough on crime people. But if he has a bigger group of people squawking at him about being more sensible about criminal justice reform, he'll probably cater to them. He'll probably start pandering to them. Whoever the bigger group is that's going to get him elected, he'll pander to them. So
All they
that's how
care
you can
about,
steer your politicians.
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
All they care about is votes. That's so true. But I look at the faces of Luke Berg, Brad Schimmel, and Governor Walker, and I just see that plastic, impervious, corrupt, predatory glow,
Yeah.
and it just makes me sick to my stomach.
Yeah, Schimmel bothers me. I mean, that guy, he's a piece of work, man. He's, I mean, how he could look at Brendan's case and see after two courts had affirmed Brendan, he suddenly thinks he's going to throw the Hail Mary and for an on-bank review, and then it succeeds. That was the part that was bewildering about it, really. It was like, you just lost twice. You throw a Hail Mary. Not only is it granted, but it succeeded. It's just like, and then the part that kills me is the on-bank majority putting the control question in as proof of Brendan resisting. Are you freaking kidding me? How is that proof of him resisting? Him buckling and being afraid to be in disagreement with Tom Fassbender, so he immediately says no and agrees to a fake fact. How is that resisting? In what world is that resisting? I just don't get it.
Yeah, let me just explain that a bit for some of my YouTube subscribers. I've got these T-shirts that you've kindly sent over from America. They're at my home right now, which is why I haven't got one on. I'm not at home on tour.
Right.
And you've got about the control question. So just to explain what that means a little bit, my understanding is you might want to expand on this. So Brendan Dassey, limited intelligence, gets manipulated by the detectives. Basically, they go into his school, tell him that he can go home and watch WrestleMania if he confesses to this rape and torture and murder of the victim. Now, in terms of a control question, it's so obvious that this was a complete manipulation of Brendan Dassey and fact feeding. Yeah. So the detectives came back and said, well, it's got to be valid because we asked control questions. We asked Brendan Dassey, did Teresa have a tattoo? Knowing that she didn't have a tattoo. And when Brendan Dassey said no, that proves he was answering with his own free will. So everything from there on was completely honest and authentic. Is that how you would explain the control question?
It's kind of, but I guess the important thing is to understand what the control question is. So it was a question that was asked as a false question, as making up a false fact of a tattoo that Teresa didn't have. So Tom Fassbender tells Brendan, we know that she had a tattoo on her stomach. She didn't have it. It's completely false. And the idea here was to test Brendan's honesty. They're giving him something fake to see if he will reject it, and therefore it will add credibility to the interrogation. If you understand what I mean, if he rejects something false, then it suggests that he actually did see and knows something, right? So that's why they were giving him this fake fact, right? So they tell him she had a tattoo on her stomach. Do you remember that? Brendan says, Now, had they stopped right there, their control question would have been a success. It would have been a success because Brendan would have said, I didn't see that fake tattoo, basically, right? So that would have been a success. However, Tom Fassbender, I think because he didn't like the wishy-washiness of the answer, pushes further and says, Brendan, do you disagree with me when I say that? Soon as he does that, Brendan immediately goes into defense mode thinking, oh my God, because he's been getting mentally conditioned the entire time, right? With the entire interrogation, he's been getting mentally conditioned. So when he says, do you disagree with me? I think Brendan gets fearful and goes, no, because he doesn't want to be in disagreement with Tom Fassbender. So he essentially says, no, I don't disagree with you, which means, yes, I do agree with you. That means he's agreeing to her having a tattoo that she did not have. And so this does not prove Brendan resisting officers. This proves Brendan buckled and acquiesced to what he thought the officers wanted to hear. That's what it proves. It absolutely is not proof of him resisting. In no way, shape, or form is it proof of Brendan resisting.
Exactly.
So, yeah, that's what the control question comes down to. And the reason why, a lot of people ask me, why do you think it's so important? Why do you think the control question is so important, Eric Jose? Well, the reason why is because Tom Fassbender talks about it every freaking time he gets in front of a camera or a microphone. Every time. And then we had the Seventh Circuit majority putting it in their decision. It's hogwash. Anybody who understands the mechanics of the English language knows that control question is not doing what the state and the on-bank majority and Tom Fassbender say. It's absolutely not right. The English language does not work the way that the state of Wisconsin and Tom Fassbender and the Seventh Circuit majority think it works. So, that's get off my soapbox about the control question. I do that quite a bit. In fact,
that was a good explanation. Yeah.
My friend Paul Capaldi likes to egg me and spur me on to talk about the control question a lot too. Every time I talk to him. So everybody that doesn't know, we're going to talk a little bit about Shaun's book, Unmaking a Murderer now. For those of you that don't know, there is a Facebook group. Not a group. It's a Facebook page. It's public. Anybody can find it. If you're on Facebook, you can find it. Shaun and I upload videos to it. I upload a lot more because I'm just on it nowadays. So I upload a lot of videos there, but Shaun does occasionally upload videos there, and there's a lot of stuff that gets put in there. So if you want to go there and kind of look for news about, make MAM every once in a while, you can go there. I'll leave you guys a link to the page and the information down below the video here. We'll talk a little bit about Shaun's book on Making a Murderer now. As I said when we were opening, I think it's a really good place for folks who are coming into my channel. I know I'm getting a lot of people, and I'm sure, Shaun, you're getting them all. I think I saw you in your video recently. You were saying they're really pouring in on your channel as well right now, right? So for all the new people coming in from MAM2, if you're not really super familiar with the facts of the case stuff, a good place to start is Unmaking a Murderer, because like I said, it really focuses on a lot of what went down in 1985 and a lot of the coercive or the corrupt tactics that went down in 1985, which give us a window, really, to my mind, it gives us a window into the happenings in 2005, 2006 that were going on with this investigation. So, the first thing about the book is awesome is you open it up right away without even going into a chapter. You just open up on Ken Kratz with that letter to Ken Kratz, right? Which follows the outline of the letter that Ken Kratz wrote to Stephen, condescending the heck out of Stephen, trying to get Stephen to tell his confession story to Ken Kratz. And you were brilliant the way that you came in with your letter. It was just hilarious. If you wanted to talk about that a little bit, what you were thinking when you were writing it and stuff like that.
Yeah, let's go back then to watching MAM season 1. I wanted to throw things at my TV. I was in tears watching Stephen's mom, especially.
Yeah.
I was exploding when I saw, what they did to him for the second time, and the ups and downs, that emotional journey.
Yeah.
Ken Kratz was the supervillain of the piece.
Right.
And when I read that letter that he wrote to Stephen,
yeah,
I just thought this is a good opportunity now to release some of this pressure that's built up in me since watching the first season.
Right.
And try and utilize my British wit while I'm doing this.
Right.
Yeah.
It was great. Those of you who have read Ken Kratz's letter to Stephen, because I know a lot of people have been talking about the fact that Stephen asked Ken Kratz, hey, look, you're not the prosecutor anymore. Why don't you come over and help me? And, whatever. Now, some people have been struggling with that. Look, Stephen was just thinking, who better to help him get off than the guy who put him in? Right? That's all. That's why. I think that's what prompted Steve to make that statement. But that's why they were talking. And the reason why that conversation happened is because Ken Kratz had sent this letter over to Stephen telling him he wanted Stephen to tell him his confession story and whatever. So then Shaun, in the opening of his book, which you guys will love it, he's doing the same thing to Kratz, where he's telling Kratz to tell Shaun his story, basically. And I guarantee you, I will listen to you, and I will, help you. And he's just doing the whole same thing to Kratz that Kratz was doing to Stephen. It's just brilliant. So,
thank you.
So we move on to the first chapter. And honestly, this is so on point it's ridiculous. It's provoking emotional reactions. This is the main tool in a dirty prosecutor's bag that they use, provoking emotional reactions from, say, Penny Burnson or the victims. Anything they can do that promotes that can bring an emotional reaction in front of the jury, to get an emotional reaction from the jury, to influence the jury that way, is certainly a tactic that the dirty prosecutor relies heavily on. You have any thoughts on that?
I was on remand unsentenced for 26 months in the county jail in Arizona. Now, the average stay in there was probably about 2 or 3 weeks. I had a complex case, a big case. My bail bond was 1.5 million. So I was stuck. I couldn't get out. Now, being in there, I'm completely housed with unsentenced prisoners. So I started to see patterns of tricks being pulled out by prosecutors that were just used over and over again. So this laid down in my brain, and then when I watched Making a Murderer, I just saw all these same things, exact same things that the prosecutors and the detectives used on the people I was housed with. So it became really clear to me, knowing these patterns, exactly what they were using to frame Stephen and Brendan. Right. And the first one, like you said, is the classic: create an emotional reaction, because court is theatre.
Yeah.
When I went to court every month, couldn't say a word. My lawyer portrayed me to be a saint. The prosecutor portrayed me to be the Antichrist, and neither were telling the truth. It is just complete and utter theatre. Yeah. And at the end of the day, whoever's got the most money puts on the best show. Right. So facts are irrelevant, because if you can get in there, if you watched the Central Park 5, West Memphis 3, The Stir Case, any of these other shows, the prosecutor gets up there, they show grisly photos of the deceased, describe their theories in minute detail of how these people were killed or tortured or raped. Teresa was chained to the bed. She was begging for her life, stabbed in the belly, but she didn't die. They hit her in the head and she didn't die. She's asking them to stop. None of this is verifiable. There's not a shred of DNA evidence that any of this actually happened.
Right. Yep.
But that creates a picture in the minds of the jurors, and it affects a part of the brain where logic and reasoning are not housed. And once you get the amygdala, the emotional side, to take over, you can convince them of anything.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, in the one of the examples I recall you using in that chapter. It's been a while since I read the book, but I recall that one of the examples you were using was the reenactment by Penny and her husband, where her husband was playing the part of Gregory Allen. Stephen Avery, because it was Stephen Avery's trial, right? And so they had this whole reenactment with Penny and her husband right in front of the jury. And like this, this was one of the tactics that Vogel used to provoke that emotional reaction, right?
Yeah, they had pictures, they had a physical reenactment. Every level of reenactment they could think of, they did in that case. Yeah,
just to provoke that emotional reaction. So yeah, definitely. So then we move on to, concealing other suspects. And trust me, there's a lot of that going on in 2005. Because, trust me, we still have no clue of who it was that was harassing Teresa by phone, according to Tom Pierce. We obviously know it was happening. Teresa wouldn't tell him about it, but we know she was getting harassed. And we still, to this day, 18 years later, still have no idea who that was. We have no idea. We have very little idea of what the heck was going on with this fire on Xander Road. Why? Why do we have almost no idea of what was going on with that? Because that's pretty fishy that there was a huge a foul-smelling fire on November 1st in the area. That's kind of strange. How do we not know more about that? So there's so many things in this that we don't know more about that really we should. That really gives credit to that one, concealing other suspects.
And the guy who's the prime suspect in any of these cases is always the boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, partner, husband. And he was allowed to lead the search party. He was allowed to taint and plant evidence.
Move into her house.
He was working with the cops. So basically, the guy who should have been the main suspect, was provided ample opportunity to frame and plant evidence and make this all look like Stephen Avery and Brendan. Well, Stephen Avery, he tried to make Stephen Avery look like he'd done it.
Yeah, absolutely. Trying to think of what else they're concealing. It looks like they've concealed. Also, it looks like they've concealed now that the Rav4 was actually parked by a dam over on, I believe it was, what was it, Highway 147 or Yambo Creek Road or whatever. There was a guy who saw it on the road and went into a gas station and saw the Teresa flyer as he was going in, and he goes, "Oh well, yeah, I think I just saw that Rav4 back down the road a little bit." Walks into the store, sees a sheriff, tells him, right, and then as that guy is watching Making a Murderer in 2015, he sees the same officer he told about the Rav4 testifying, calling in the plates and everything and all that. It was Officer Colburn. This guy recognized Officer Colburn. What is it? 13 years later, when he was watching Making a Murderer, and like, oh, that's that guy I told about the Rav4. I mean, are you kidding me? It's like, yeah, there's a lot of concealing going on, definitely.
Some of my earliest videos on YouTube, my man videos that got a lot of hits, were videos about the damage to the RAV4, clearly indicating that it had been moved.
Right, absolutely. And that's what the new thing that, Zellner's coming up with, that parking blinker light. Another thing that implicates Brian, because he told Tom Fassbender that Teresa had claimed that damage to that blinker with her insurance, and that she had gotten a lump sum and just chose not to repair it. That's not true. Kathleen Zellner checked with Teresa's insurance company. That's not true. She never made a claim for this blinker light on the front. So that's out. So we know he lied there. So then some of the guilters were saying, oh no, but she made it with somebody else. It was somebody else's insurance, right? And the DOJ has proof of it. The DOJ, the Department of Justice, has proof of it. Okay. I actually went, maybe they're right. That's plausible. That could happen. Certainly. It's, But then I saw the Queso 2.0 come out, and then I saw that they were there, basically begging Mike Halbach to go through all of his old computers, desperately hoping on a wing and a prayer that he's going to have a picture of that damage to Teresa's RAV4 to prove that damage existed before October 31st. That is how they're trying to prove it. They have no proof.
Yeah,
Ryan
that proof
lied about it. So, I mean, yeah.
That proof is in the same dreamland as the proof that Stephen, in his first case, that the Sandman was meeting with his probation officer on the day of the assault.
Exactly. Very similar to that. Exactly. That's what I say, the parallels between 85 and 2005 are just, So then we got chapter 3 of the Coerced Confessions, which obviously brings us to Brendan Dassey. You know what I mean? Any thoughts on Brendan before I start?
I would say that after Teresa, Brendan is the second biggest victim in this case.
I think you may be right.
Because he had no criminal history whatsoever. He was a student, a teenager, a child, mentally challenged, learning limited, vulnerable. And to just hustle a child out of a school, make false promises, and to coerce them into confessing to this heinous crime is that is a crime in itself. Those detectives, they were about to go on the road after season 1 with a show giving their side of it, saying that these guys were guilty, but they had to call it off because of all of the threats that came in.
Yeah.
Well, these guys should be in prison, and the reason they're not, and the reason that all of the players in the state get away with this, is because of absolute immunity.
Yeah.
They can break the law. There's a brilliant video by Zellner that I watched, and she's talking about how they can commit fraud, they can commit crimes, they can commit all kinds of criminal acts and have absolute immunity from prosecution in these cases.
Yeah, they can. It's a shame. I hope we're gonna start repealing that a bit, because I think some prosecutors, there's some prosecutors out there that, and Kim Worthy is one that rings out because she's the one that convicted Devontae Sanford. She really pisses me off because she convicted this kid, Devontae Sanford, at 14 years old. He's a limited kid, wasn't the smartest kid, and 7 days after the conviction, a hitman surfaced taking credit for the 4 murders that she had pinned on Devontae Sanford, also took credit for another 8 murders that they hadn't been able to pin on anybody. He led them to the gun. The ballistics all matched up. He was the guy. He was the guy. He gave an affidavit saying Devontae Sanford had nothing to do with it. Kim Worthy would not make it right. She ended up just getting the hitman for the 8 that she hadn't previously had anybody convicted for, and she left Devontae Sanford in for 15 years. Now, had she corrected it 7 days in? And you should care about this, the state of Michigan, because it's her that cost you that money. Had she corrected it 7 days in, you would not have had to pay Devontae Sanford almost $500,000. If she had corrected it at the right time, you would have got your taxpayer money. Maybe Flint, Michigan could probably get some nice water going back into Flint, Michigan if she hadn't made that mistake. So I think you people in Michigan have something really seriously to get up about with Kim Worthy, and I think you really should. So, but yes, that's the type of stuff that bugs me anyway. Go ahead.
me too. I mean, if you look at the Central Park 5, they eventually were exonerated. The real killer came forward, and to this day, the prosecutor is still saying those guys had something to do with the real killer. They may have been a group.
Yeah, I know. It's just ridiculous. It's so
Sickness.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's these, but I will say there are some good ones out there, and I'll bring that up because I did a video about a prosecutor named James Farron. It was a Nightline episode about called "The Case of the Pink Gun," and originally there was this couple, and the husband had an ex-wife. And the ex-wife turned up shot and killed on this dirt road near the town. Well, the prosecution went after the wife of the couple at first because her pink gun was found to have been the weapon that killed the ex-wife. So they went after her. She was in jail for a long time. They were building the case against her. And then eventually the prosecutor, he was able to check the cell phone of her son. Unfortunately, that day she didn't have her Wi-Fi turned on. When she was driving around during the day that the ex-wife was killed. She didn't have her Wi-Fi and her phone turned on, but her son did. Her son had his Wi-Fi turned on. So as they were driving down the streets, his Wi-Fi was pinging off of local businesses and residences, and that pinging was in his phone, and it basically showed them a path of exactly where they were that day, and they know he knew that she wasn't near where the ex-wife was killed, and so he lets her go. He took a lot of crap for it. He took a lot of crap for it, folks. I mean, I admire James Farron because he did the right thing, took a lot of crap for it, and then went after the husband and nailed him to the wall. Got him. So that's a good prosecutor. That's a prosecutor who's conscientious and wants to do their job right and wants to make sure they get the right person in and not just get the conviction. And that I applaud, and I will sing James Farron's praises till the day I die.
Yeah, and the pinging is helping now with Stephen as well.
Yeah. This one was a little newer, so it had the Wi-Fi app, and they were able to get the pinging off of the Wi-Fi, off of people's routers, basically, as it was going down the streets. So, so that type of thing. So they were able to really pinpoint where she was, and so amazing. But yes, he could have just gone forward. He probably could have got the conviction on her, but he chose to do the right thing, and I applaud him very much for that. So, yes, there are some good prosecutors out there. They're not all a bunch of King Kratzes. So then we have, moving on to Chapter 4, Planting Evidence, which is in spades in 2005. You know, the key, the bones, the bullet. I mean, there's virtually nothing that isn't planted. I'm pretty sure the blood's planted. I'm just struggling to figure out how at this point. I'm still like not decided on how it got planted, but I'm still pretty sure it looks planted. It doesn't look right, and so it's just a matter of finding out how it was planted. but Zellner has a decent theory. Requires somebody getting into Stephen's bathroom sink, but he would have been bleeding pretty badly, so there would have been a lot of blood to collect there. So it is a possibility. So I don't know if you've heard about that, but.
Yeah, I mean, I put that one out after season 1. The blood evidence, Zellner said, was the biggest evidence against him.
Yes.
But going back to season 1, I think it was Buting who pointed out about Stephen's injury. He'd cut himself working with all the machinery. There was blood in his sink, and it looked like someone had just gone in there with a Q-tip or something and extracted blood out of his sink. Also, while Stephen was incarcerated, I think it was 18 years, his first incarceration, there were multiple times that the state of Wisconsin extracted his blood and extracted his DNA. And, you know, these haven't even been, a lot of this stuff hasn't even been brought up.
Right. But they're probably locked up in evidence rooms, and that's probably why the state of Wisconsin's probably glad those are locked up and weren't out in a common area like the other vial. It was, you know.
Well, that's just a good old boys club, isn't it? Those locker rooms, that's accessible by these corrupt cops.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, there's the bones where we only have a very limited amount of them, only one tooth that had to that I don't even know if it's really one tooth. It was glued back together by a forensic dentist who says that they're the two pieces that go together, but I don't know. They're so badly damaged and misshapen from the fire that I don't know how he could really tell, but maybe he's right. But why aren't there more teeth? Why aren't there, you know, they're basically saying that there's bones missing. They think that part of it, they might have had trouble with the torso, and so they took the torso to the smelter and various things like that. But those bones have never been right. I mean, and the other thing is, I did a video recently, is, you know, they for some reason, instead of taking like Cadaver Dog Brutus over to the trailer while it was still sunny and shiny outside on on November 5th, when they found the car, when they found the RAV4, instead of going from the RAV4 and going over by Steven's trailer while it was still sunny and still a good optimal conditions for Brutus, they waited until like 6:30. Now it was slushy raining. They sent Brutus back to the entrance of Avery Salvage for, it was like 3 or 4 hours. So then at like 6:30, they're bringing, it's getting dark. There's a slushy rain falling. This all cuts down on Cadaver Dog Brutus's effectiveness. And then they're taking him over by the trailer and where the burn pit is. And then it's just amazing. And we see that Cadaver Dog Brutus is just totally not into it, because he starts reacting to the other dogs that are around on the yard instead of like focusing on what he does, which is finding cremains. So it's a very strange of the decision making that gets made, and so much about it is just bizarre.
Well, there's some basic questions here. You know, she obviously wasn't murdered where Brendan, in his coerced confession, said after the fact feeding. The bedroom, there's no evidence there. The bullet in the garage near the garage, there's bullets all over that property. They shot all day long at all kinds of stuff. Yep. So where was she murdered? Now, if she was murdered away from the Avery property, why would Stephen move the bones back to right outside of his own house? Right. That doesn't make any sense.
That's absolutely correct. Yep, that doesn't make any damn sense. Because
and then why the hell?
If you get her away from your place, why? It absolutely makes no sense that you would bring it back to your own doorstep. It just doesn't make sense.
So only someone framing Stephen would plant bones outside of his property. And if you're planting bones, if you're moving bones, there's a chance these bones are going to break, spill out, and there's going to be a distribution of them across the land. And that's exactly what we've seen in this case.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, and then there's the fact of Redant saying, I didn't see a fire. I never saw a fire there. I saw a glow from a burn barrel. So it's like, and trust me, the accounts of the fire just do my head in. They just really just piss me off and frustrate the hell out of me, because nobody has a consistent story about these fires. There's no fire, then there's a fire. The fire is 4 feet high. The fire is 6 feet high. The fire is as high as the garage roof. Then there's no fire, just the glow from a burn barrel. It's like there is no consistency on the fire stories in this case, which serves to make things more confusing, and it's just like,
Yeah.
So absolutely, just just something else. But anyway, so then that moves. So actually, let's talk a little bit about the key in the cabinet, just because that's another favorite. I obviously have done a video about that. I mean, there is no way what Colburn suggests happened with that key could have happened, especially not with all the change on top staying right in the same perfect position. without moving. I mean, if he's shaking it vigorously, the change and things on top of it should have moved. But it doesn't look like anything moved. And when you look at my video, even when I am able to get that key to pop out of the cabinet, the key falls up against the baseboard. It kept falling against the baseboard every time. It never fell. It never fell 3 feet or 3 inches away from the baseboard out into the middle of the floor. That didn't happen. There was one way where I lodged it into the side, but it would have been obviously visible if it had been lodged in this way. But it was like there's the backing and the sidewall, and I had kind of wedged it in between the backing and the sidewall. I kind of did this. It fell out. That time it fell about maybe 2 inches from the wall. But if it had been lodged in the cabinet that way, everybody and their brother would have seen it right away. Looking at the cabinet from the side, you would have seen it. And if you watch my video, you'll see what I mean, because I show how I have it wedged in there. And if you're looking at the cabinet from the side, you can clearly see the key and lanyard. It's not hidden. It sticks out like a sore thumb. So it really couldn't have been wedged in that way. And when it's inside the cabinet and falls out, it always falls against the baseboard. So, Andy Colburn's story is absolutely just farcical. But at least we get to hear Kucharski tell us about the aliens. That was, for me, that was the comic relief in MAM1. I about died laughing when he freaking said it could have been aliens. So then that moves us to pay experts to lie. And I'm sure you probably got lots of stories about that.
Well, my big wake-up call on that was my own lawyer, Alan Simpson, in Arizona. He got a guy off death row, the snaggletooth killer Ray Crone. Right. And a waitress was found dead at a bar. There was a bite mark. There was DNA. And the DNA didn't match Ray, who'd been in the bar. He was a postman. He'd been with his mum at the time of the murder. Right. And the teeth didn't match either. So state of Arizona paid an expert witness $50,000 to say his teeth matched when they knew it didn't. It's so common, it's called testy lying.
Yeah, testy lying. Right.
So basically, the state of Arizona has all the resources in the world. They gave Ray $5,000 to defend himself, and they're paying experts $50,000 a pop to come in and tell lies. Who's going to win? Courts Theatre. Ray lost. He was on death row for over 10 years till he got exonerated. Right. Now, state of Wisconsin has got all the money in the world to pay expert witnesses, and they'll say whatever they want for the states to even. It gets even worse than that. These crime labs, they're giving made-to-order results these days. If you look at the Stir case, what was his name? Dwayne
Diva,
blood splatter expert. So not only will they say anything, but they'll give results, DNA results. They'll give the cops, the detectives, the prosecutors.
Yeah.
Whatever results they want to show this guy's done it. So right. How can the justice system operate on that basis?
Yeah, that's why I was excited to see recently Dean and Jerry and another lawyer, I think his name was Keith Finley in Wisconsin. They started this thing called CIFS, and it's basically the Center for Integrity of Forensic Sciences. And it's basically meant to try to create a standard and create this nonprofit organization that will work with leading people in the criminal justice system, the lawyers and criminal justice advocates, and work with all these various people to try to make sure that the junk science gets phased out of courtrooms, so that we're dealing with truth and fact in our courtrooms and everything. So they're trying to get this to take off. I was pretty excited about it. I did a video about it. I think it's something that could really help with limiting this test-lying that happens moving into the future. Hopefully, if this organization catches on, and if, say, like with the Innocence Projects, every state starts to pop up with their own version of CIFS to clean up the science coming into their courtrooms, I think that would be great. So I recognize it for what it is. It's something that's forward thinking, and so that's why I bring it up now. And I think Dean and Jerry are really taking a practical approach to making criminal justice reform here. Not going to happen overnight, but if this catches on, I think the huge benefit moving down the road 5 to 10 years from now could just be huge.
Well, I hope that does catch on, but the criminals working in the justice system, it's an arms race. They just find new criminal techniques to convict innocent people.
Right.
It's in their nature. They're psychopaths.
Yeah. Well, at least now there'll be an organization that's there actively combating it. So
Good,
hopefully it
good.
won't be. I mean, hopefully if it catches on, and then hopefully it'll be harder for these types of sciences to get in. Yeah, maybe they'll be successful in getting junk science in here or there, but hopefully with organizations like this, it'll get limited. Because I think it's important that our courtrooms deal in fact. We want to deal in fact and truth. You're playing with people's freaking lives. When you have a court trial, particularly a murder trial going on, you got a victim's family, you've got a defendant's family, you've got all the people that live in that area that are, interested in what's happening. They want to know that, whoever committed this horrible crime is going to pay for it, and they want to make sure that the person that's on trial for it is the right person. And there's so many lives that are in affected when we have trials like this. We can't just be bringing in junk and calling it fact. We have to be more conscientious, and that's why I think CIFS might be a big deal. So that was something I was pretty excited to see personally. So if we move on to chapter 6, is get the public defender to work for the prosecutor. So we all know who he's talking about there.
Someone who's wearing orange right now, isn't he? Len
Exactly.
Kaczynski.
Meow.
Yeah. But even worse, perhaps, was his sidekick. Getting Brendan
Kelly.
to do diagrams and...
Yeah, O'Kelly, he's something else too. And then when he gets called on it in the appeals court, and he's on the stand and he's getting called on it, and he knows how bad he's looking. Suddenly he's crying about the blue ribbons. Suddenly he's just blubbering and can't even talk about the blue ribbons.
Trying to create an emotional reaction.
Hey, there you go. It's a recurring theme, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's good old Len Kaczynski. I mean, it's to me, it's just amazing how the on-bank judges were, or even the Seventh Circuit judges were trying to tell Luke Berg, like, what about what Len Kaczynski did? And then Luke Berg's just like, oh, we don't defend what he did. Of course you don't defend what he did, but the fact is he did it. And that was hugely detrimental to Brendan. He was, to be that badly served by his own lawyer. To deny that is the case is just bizarre. But what else I love about Luke Berg is that he chose to use the phrase strains credulity. I now use that all the time. I love that. So.
Yeah, on this point then about Brendan Dassey, I'd just like to add, when I post man videos and stuff like that, I still get people saying, well, how can you support Stephen Avery? He molested Brendan, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And just to clarify what happened there, they manipulated Brendan into saying certain things that had happened during roughhouse wrestling with Stephen. And then they told Brendan to call his mum and to say these things on the phone. And they extracted snippets from that conversation to make it sound like Stephen had molested his nephew. That's how cunning and evil and corrupt these state of Wisconsin is.
Yeah.
That was Fassbender and Wiegert.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at it, I meant to mention this earlier, is that you can watch the way that they targeted, the way that they honed in on Brendan. It started, they were trying to get Jody to say bad things about Stephen, to say that he wanted sex too much and that it was rough and all, and they're trying to get her to say all these things to drag Stephen through the mud and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And she didn't want to do it. And so, after the last, on the 22nd, they were talking to her, and when they left, she went to the jail, and she just said, "Don't let them back in. I don't want to talk to them again."
Yeah.
Basically, just please, I don't want to talk to them anymore. Just tell them to go away when they come back, and that was it. They were shut off. They were cut off from Jody. They could not go and talk to her anymore. So now they're like, oh, I know. Let's take the Dassey boys over to Fox Hills for the weekend. And let's go check them out. And they spend an entire weekend figuring out that they can hone in on Brendan, and they could probably pretty much get Brendan to say whatever they want him to say. And boom, the rest is history.
So sad.
Yeah, it is. It truly is. But you can see how craven these investigators were, trying to go around and push people into saying things, certain things. And because they were going around and trying to get, because they started with Jody, and we know that there's other people that feel like they were pushed by investigators in this case. Josh Redant feels like he was pushed by people from investigators from the DOJ. That's not Calumet or Manitowoc. He says the DOJ investigators, he felt pressured by them to say that the fire was bigger and bigger. Okay? I mean, so when it's all over this case, but yeah, you see that these investigators were pushing people to make things bigger, make the accounts more grandiose, more, right? And that's what it come down to with Jody and Brendan and how that all plays out. And for them to try to say, oh no, it's just innocent, we were just following the standard techniques and blah, blah, blah. No, dude, you're not supposed to use the full read technique on a juvenile, certainly not one of limited intelligence. To which Fassbender comes back with, I don't assess intelligences. You're a moron, Tom Fassbender, because you are an investigator. It's your job to sum up people on the snap of a finger, drop of a hat. You have to size situations up quickly as an investigator because that's your job. And to suggest that after an entire weekend at Fox Hills and the first part of the week leading up to March 1st, that you had no idea that Brendan had limitations, you're an idiot. You're a moron. And anyways, so there, that's it. Tom Fassbender really pisses me off. In fact, I think Tom Fassbender gets my goat the way Ken got yours. So that moves us into neutralizing honest witnesses. Now that was an interesting chapter. Because of the way that Vogel used the tactic Vogel used to discredit Stephen's alibi witnesses.
Yeah, if you go back to the first case, and there were like literally dozens of people that saw Stephen around the time that this act was getting committed, and they basically just portrayed all those witnesses. They got them one after the other into the courtroom and just said, basically, you'd lie for your own family member. They tried to trick them into admitting that in one way or another, and that's how they neutralized all these dozens of witnesses.
Right, but it had to do with, because the defense brought in a expert that was talking about how when people talk about a memory or talk about something that happened, that in and of itself can change the memory. And that Vogel then, because the defense was using that to suggest that that's how they got Penny Burnson to make the sketch, and how she ended up identifying Stephen Avery instead of Gregory Allen, and so that was the defense was using that to prove how Penny's memory could have possibly gotten fudged. So Vogel takes that, uses that testimony from that expert, and uses it to discredit all of Avery's, alibi witnesses by basically asking them a question. Did you talk to anybody else about this? And if they said yes, he discredited them.
Exactly.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then he gets Mama Avery up there, though, and God damn, I love Mama Avery. She is so awesome. He kept trying to get her. He kept trying to get her to say she talked about this, and because what it was all coming down to is she was watching Judge Wapner and the People's Court at the time that this was all, the pertinent time that this was all happening, and so he was trying to get her to say that she was talking to other people about watching People's Court or whatever. She was like, oh, I don't need to talk to anybody else. I know what I was doing. I was there. So she ends up putting the stopper on him right there. It was so funny. I love it. She's just so full of spitfire and just, she's, she don't take no crap. When she gets fed up, she gets fed up. I love it. So, so that was the neutralizing honest witnesses. I mean, that tactic, the tactic of Vogel using the defense's witness to, it's crazy. Anyway, this is the reasons why you guys should all read this book. I mean, it's really good. And obviously, John Farrak's book. If you guys haven't heard about that, have you ordered your copy of John Farrak's book yet?
No, I've not read it.
Wrecking Crew, man. Apparently, he's been working close with Zellner too. So there's
great.
I guess some stuff in there that's going to be like somewhat exclusive or whatever. And but I would say read Unmaking a Murderer first. I think John Frack's gonna that book is I think gonna be the advanced edition. It's gonna have a lot of specific digging into evidence and things like that is what I'm expecting from John Frack. So start with this one, because I think this one, like I said, sets up the framework for what we see in 85 and how we're seeing those similar things in 2005, and it provides a framework of understanding how this whole thing happens and how it works. So that would that would now put us into procuring dishonest witnesses, which obviously there's probably a number of them. But
how big are the flames? How big was the fire?
Scott and his reports of the fire are bizarre. I mean, I don't know how anybody can look at the first report where he's saying it's like 4 or 5 feet high, then see a second interrogation or talk with Scott, and then now it's suddenly 6 or 7 feet high, and then it's suddenly until when he gets into court, suddenly these flames are as high as the roof of the garage. Well, Josh Radant says all he could see was a glow from a burn barrel. I mean, it's just so wacky. It's absolutely hire sociopathic prosecutors. Yeah. Another great chapter in there. So that's where he kind of goes into a lot of the tactics used by King Kratz and even Fallon, because Fallon, like, okay, in his closing argument at the Brendan Dassey trial, Fallon, he says something that is so false, but he tells the jury, he says, innocent people don't confess. That is a lie. That is an absolute lie. He lied in court. That should be perjury. That absolutely should be perjury. And he said that because he was influencing this jury who he knew might have trouble convicting this kid on just a confession. When that kid got on the stand and he took every shot, every blow from Fallon, he took everything. He took it all. He took everything that Fallon had, and he still came out. And he still came out on top. And I know Fallon didn't like that. And that's probably why he tells that lie in his closing argument. It just pisses me off. I know it pisses my friend Mark Hodden off too. So,
and if you look at how narcissistic and sociopathic Kratz was back then as well, I mean, he was targeting vulnerable women whose cases he was working on. There was one case filed that he actually forced himself did a full sexual assault on a victim, but that was brushed under the carpet, and because it was such a vulnerable woman and she was mentally unstable, he got away with that one because they couldn't say she was a credible witness against him.
Right.
But there were multiple incidents of Kratz just trying to force himself on these vulnerable women, text stalking, sending sexual pest messages. And, when he got up and did that press conference and described all these lurid details, that was a product of his imagination.
Yeah.
Because that's the kind of guy that he is.
Absolutely.
One thing I learned was that people who accuse other people of doing certain things, I saw this in prison, whether they accuse people of being sex offenders or snitches, quite often, the majority of the cases, the person doing the accusing was the one trying to deflect their own guilt because they were the one committing those acts. And I think we've seen this hardcore with Ken Kratz. He's the guy out there committing these acts, thinking about these things, and he's projected all that onto Stephen A. and Brendan. See, with this, this rape scene in Brendan's bedroom that there's no evidence of at all.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of proof of that. I mean, looking at the way that they just fed Brendan virtually every pertinent, plot turn and plot twist and everything. I mean, yeah, it's absolutely very, very, very evident. And then number 10, the chapter number 10 of Rig the Jury. Now, there is some real funky things going on when it comes to the jury, namely the one who got removed, whose daughter had a little bit of traffic altercation, um, but it wasn't as serious as they led the juror to believe. He probably could have stayed on as a juror, but he was also being kind of pretty badly badgered by the what was it, the father of a sheriff's deputy that was on the jury.
There were a whole host of people on the jury linked to law enforcement, either by family or by some kind of relationship they'd had with them through work. And, the juror, he said he felt threatened. He felt threatened. There was the one guy in particular that you're referencing, and he felt badgered and threatened by this individual.
Right. Yeah, he was something about that individual actually told him, like, oh, if you have a problem with this, maybe you should leave or step down from the jury or whatever, or something like that. Like he was actually telling the guy to go and get out or whatever it was, I thought. But
I mean, even if all of these other tactics fail, if you rig the jury, you've got the result that you wanted.
Yeah. And
so they had that in place.
Right. And I mean, Poggle's not supposed to be interacting with the jury, from what I understand. So why is he interacting with the jury? I mean, he's a party with vested interests. He's the head sheriff of Calumet County. I wouldn't want anybody that might be biased to be handling the jury. I would prefer it be people who are less biased. Not saying, not to get into whether or not Jerry Poggle's right or wrong about what he believes about the case, but just because he's biased one way or the other, I'd prefer that those types of people aren't really handling the jury. It should be more middle of the road people that are handling the jury, so that they're not affecting the jury.
The case should have been moved out of state. They should have had it in London. We would have given a better decision.
Yeah, we'll just fly everybody over to across the pond. So, all right. So that's all the chapters of the book, and I do highly recommend everybody to go to read it, to pick it up and read it. It's a really good read. But my friend Paul wanted me to ask you if you were red or blue, Man City, or if you were Man United.
Because I lived in Arizona for 17 years, I stopped following it. But when I was a kid, I was Man U.
Oh, you're Man United, so red.
Yeah.
All right. So you became a football fan, basically, is what you're saying.
As a kid, well, in America, it was American football, it was basketball, right. It was baseball. But what I never said to anyone when I was in America was, most of those games are what the girls play in England. Baseball is a game called rounders, and basketball is a game called netball.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And only girls play it, huh? Hey, look. Hey, you guys play cricket. I've seen plenty of dudes playing cricket. Very similar to baseball.
Badminton.
Badminton. Yeah. So, I will say it's been a pleasure talking with you and talking to you about your book and things about the case. If there was any other things that you wanted to say before we go,
I just want to say kudos to you, man, because I turn my phone on in the morning and I'll have like a notification from YouTube, and it'll be another video posted by you, and I'm like brushing my teeth, I'm getting ready, and I'm listening to your stuff. And you really have carried the torch out of everybody. I mean, in the beginning, a lot of people popped up and started posting videos. Some dropped off completely. Some have posted more sporadically. I've had to focus on other projects, but out of everybody, you have kept that torch burning bright and loud and kept it real. And my hat is off to you for that.
Thank you. I just try to stay humble and stick with what's gotten me here, and everything. And I think people do respond to my kind of genuine, honest nature, and the fact that I'm trying to put up documents and proof of things, not just trying to sit here and be a talking head and expect people to just take my word for it. So I think that helps, and I just kind of try to stick to those staples, and I do appreciate it. It's actually I love the fact thinking that you wake up every morning while you're getting ready and you're listening to my last night's live, because I mean, and I have been going every day, and everybody has just been so supportive of it. If I even mention that I want to take a couple days off, people start like freaking out. So it's touching. I care about the criminal justice here. I care about Brendan and Stephen. I care about what happened here, and I can't stop caring. So I mean, it's just, I've moved into other cases, which, by the way, I did want to thank you for one other thing before we go. I have moved into other cases and will continue to look into other cases, but I want to thank you, Shaun, for helping me out with the Scott Davis case a little bit there. You allowed me to send you 2 update videos for the Scott Davis case, the 2018 updates. The Scott Davis case is something, folks, while I have you here, I'd like to just talk about real quick. It's a case that really bugs me because it is a completely circumstantial case against Scott Davis. And we have witness accounts that Scott's ex-wife was the guy who was killed was David Coffin. It was Scott's ex-wife's boyfriend at the time. They were going through a divorce and she was seeing this guy, David Coffin. David Coffin ends up shot in the head, burning in his home. And there is actually witness accounts of people who heard Megan saying that David had been shot in the head while the house was still burning. You all understand the problem with that, right? The fact that she could know that while the house was in flames, she couldn't have known it while the house was in flames. So it means she must have been there before the house was in flames to be able to know that he had been shot in the head. So the Scott Davis case, and Georgia keeps dragging their feet about it. They lost 50 pieces of evidence before trial. Two of the things they lost, one of them was what they believed was the killer's blood, but it didn't match Scott, so that got lost. And the other one was the fingerprints that they believe were the killer's, but those didn't match Scott, so those got lost. So I just wanted to thank you so much for allowing me to post those things on your channel and bring a little bit more awareness to that case, because it is one that's close to my heart, just like Brendan and Stephen are. And I wanted to thank you very much for that, because you've always been a good sport about that.
I'd also like to thank the Stephen Avery is Guilty group for posting 1-star reviews on Making a Murderer on Amazon. Apparently, Amazon likes to see a good spread of reviews to promote it on its algorithm, so it's all helped the sales.
Oh. Well, that's good. That's good.
Because the reviews are overwhelmingly positive. Yes.
So yeah, count your blessings, when they come from funny places.
If anyone's interested, I do have a Making a Murderer playlist on my YouTube channel, and at the top of that right now I've got 2 videos that explain how to send things to Brendan, how to send things to Stephen, how to send mail, how to buy them things. You can't just put things in the mail and send them. Hundreds of letters got sent back, didn't have the proper DOC number, Department of Corrections number for these guys. Prisons have extremely strict rules. If you want to get them a letter, mail them some, have them get them some books, get them some property, send them some money. There's very particular rules as to how you do this. So I explain all that clearly. All of the procedures laid out. The bottom of the videos is a description box with links to where you can actually send these guys money, send these guys property through the system that the prison has got set up to facilitate this.
Yeah, and for everybody that may not have noticed, in the info below all of my lives are the links to those 2 videos he was just speaking about. Those links are in, and I will also have those 2 same links will be in the information below this video. I'll add them into this video so that you can go check them out and get educated on what exactly you got to do to get your package through to Stephen and Brendan.
Yeah, mail is gold. Mail is gold in prison. You see the fellas stood around the guard tower when the mail comes, all with this look of hope in their eyes, and the guys who don't get any mail, they walk away crushed. So things that we take for granted in everyday life, if you get a letter, if you get a book sent to you through Amazon, these things are like gold bars dropping down onto the prison system for these guys. It really helps them psychologically, helps them to feel connected with the outside world.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine. So that's about it for this. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. Perhaps we can do this again sometime, perhaps as a live chat.
Yeah,
where
appreciate.
we can have everybody, asking questions in real time, possibly.
I really look forward to doing that. Just hope I can catch up with my own technology to be able to record these interviews myself, which is
Well,
what I'm working
absolutely.
on.
We can give it a couple weeks to a month and give you a chance to work all that out. Didn't I
Cheers.
notice in your most recent video you've kind of developed a little studio now?
Well, yeah, down south, I'm based near London, so down south I've got a film crew, I've got a cameraman, I've got a sound engineer, I've got a studio in London I can rent, I've got a studio in the town where I'm based that I can rent. I did buy, because people were complaining about my home videos, I did buy a Fuji camera which cost over $1,000, but I spent 2 days with my dad going over tutorials and we still can't figure how the bloody hell to use it, so...
You're gonna have to call your younger cousins or something, buddy, and get them over there. They'll help
I
you
know.
figure it out. The kids
Technology.
figure it out, man. The kids
Yeah,
figure
they
it out.
do. They do.
So,
Yeah.
alrighty, buddy. It has been an absolute pleasure talking with you, buddy.
Cheers. You take care. Enjoy your holiday, man.
Yeah, you too, buddy. So that concludes my discussion with Shaun Atwood today. I mean, I had a lot of fun. I had a blast talking to Shaun today, talking to him about the book, Unmaking a Murderer. I do suggest everybody get out there and read that book, especially if you're new to this stuff and you're really trying to acclimate. It's a real good place to start because it starts with just all the stuff that can be easily proven from 85 and all the things that we see go on there. And it's just a good fundamental place to start so that you have something, a kind of a frame of reference when you start looking at a lot of the things that were going on in 2005. So like I said, I suggest it for that reason. Definitely. Also, everybody, go get Stacy Seabrook on iTunes. Get that guy. Get him. Come on. Let's get that guy uploaded on iTunes. I want to get him. I think the world of him. His songs are brilliant. I'm the type of guy who likes lyrics in my music. I mean, I do love the music, but I'm also a type of guy, I'm really cerebral, so I really like interesting lyrics, and Stacy nails that for me. I love the fact that his lyrics are very, very, it just shows his knowledge of the case, and anyways, I just think the world of him. Hope you guys all will just help him blow up on iTunes there. I'm sure we'll get him uploading more. You guys can all see he's really going in the studio now and improving all these songs. That new edition of Brain Fingerprint Them All is just, oh my lord, that is awesome. And now with all the talk about trying to get Ken Kratz to go in for the brain fingerprinting, so it's timely that he souped up the Brain Fingerprint Them All, because that was always one of my favorites when he first uploaded it. Even though it was just kind of simple with him on the guitar, it was still just, I loved it. He nailed it. The lyrics were great. The tune, the rhythm was great. It was just good. It was a really good tune. But he's now souped it up, and it's even better than it was. So go help Stacy Seabrook out. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. And get ready for me going live in 1 hour. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe, and we'll see you then.